Brilliant. Hey, worth kind of bringing that scene to kind of mind in our imagination. Jesus has just been out in the wilderness. He's been tempted by Satan, kind of the great kind of temptations of the world to put himself before God, to kind of have self-reliance. And he's been tempted and he overcomes those temptations and he comes back into Galilee and he begins his public ministry. And he starts by going back home to Nazareth, his hometown. And he walks into the synagogue on the Sabbath day. You can kind of imagine the scene, can't you? Jesus is coming back in and, I suspect there would have just been something about him having come out of the desert, out of the wilderness, 40 days having fasted in the wilderness without food and being tempted, having overcome Satan. This man, Jesus, walks in to the synagogue and he takes this verse, this scroll, Isaiah 61, that's the quote that we just heard in Luke's gospel. And of course, Isaiah was a prophet, one of the most significant prophets in the life of Israel. And Isaiah prophesied towards the end of the book of Isaiah, you begin to get this kind of really forward-looking kind of prophecies that kind of speak of the world as it should be, of God restoring everything, making things right, of God himself coming into the world to overcome evil and death and brokenness and kind of recommission humanity for all that God had in store for us. And Jesus grabs these words from Isaiah and he kind of roots his ministry. He makes this connection between the hope of Israel, the hope of the whole world, and he says, this is why I'm here. This is what my ministry is all about. And that's what we read, wasn't it? That's what Nathan read for us. The Spirit of the Lord is on me, says Jesus, because he's anointed me to proclaim good news to the poor. Freedom for the prisoners, recovery of sight to the blind, setting the oppressed free. Across the world, those of us who kind of, people getting caught and trapped in kind of addictions, things that kind of bind us, imprison us, and prevent us from living the fullness of life that God's called us to. Jesus has come to set us free. We get so absorbed by the things of this world and we're so drawn to the stuff in this life that kind of grabs our attention. And Jesus has come to open our eyes. We're blinded by the lights, the bright lights of this world. He wants us to see the truth of who God is and who we are, made in God's image, of all that he would have for us. To set the oppressed free. This is the day, if you like, the moment, the season of life, the moment of God's favor. It's wonderful, isn't it? It's fantastic. This is the gospel. And, I don't know about you, but I kind of, we talk about, the Spirit and the work of God in the world. And sometimes we can kind of privatize that and we kind of think that that's about me and my salvation, my personal experience of God. Sometimes when we're worshiping, we get a feeling or a sense of God's presence. I mean, they are good things. Of course, my salvation matters. Of course, experiencing God is good. But in some sense, the ministry of Jesus today is the same as it always was then. It's about this sense of freedom and restoring life and justice and peace and goodness for the whole world. That's what God is in the business of. That's what Jesus is still in the business of today, working through his people, his church. And that's what we're invited into. And I think sometimes we can just forget that bigger picture, that bigger thing that we are part of. And we get so caught up in me and my stuff. But actually there's a bigger movement here. And as I said earlier, I think I'd love us to think a bit today about making a difference in our city, making a bigger difference in our city, and how God can kind of mobilize us as the church for this very ministry today. Enabling justice and goodness, freedom for those who need it, being God's hands and feet, agents of this message, this gospel in the world, and how we can do that together as a church. So we're going to have a little kind of particular focus on that. Of course, how we do that in our jobs, in our workplace, in our vocations, down our street. Of course, all of that is just good and special. But maybe there's some things we can do together as church that kind of tap into some of this stuff. And to help us with that thought process, Beej is going to come up and give us a little bit of input really on kind of peace and justice and God's goodness here at St. James. So should we welcome Beej? Let's welcome Beej up. Thank you, Beej. Let me give you one of them.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Oh, Beej, good to have you with us again. We did this morning, but good to be doing it again. And Beej, I just to sort of embarrass you at the start of this conversation. I've just found, Beej, you've been really inspiring to me over the years because I feel that you've kept, banging the drum, calling us as a church to remember this stuff. Being people who are seeking justice for all, who've got that bigger picture. And do you want to just tell us a little bit? Maybe you could just share a bit from your own story of why this is so important to you, and maybe some of the things we've done in the past as a church in this space. Is that okay?
Yep, that's
Thanks,
okay.
Beej.
I've got to hold this by my mouth, haven't I?
Apparently so. That's
yeah.
Yep.
If it drifts away.
Yeah.
If it drifts away, just tell me. Okay.
There we go.
Right. Okay. Right. So we, St James in the City, it wasn't actually called St James in the City at the time, but it started in 2008, and Neil Short was our vicar then. And early on in my Christian life, I became a Christian when I was 20, a long time ago. And so early on in my Christian life, I realized that social justice was really important, and something happened in particular, I won't go into now, but it just made me that since then, in the church Andy and I were involved in before, I made sure that we were involved in social justice stuff. And so when we came here at the beginning of this church, Neil Short, our vicar then, had us in our small groups were called purpose groups, and Katie Harding and I led the Peace and Justice group, and we got involved with loads of stuff. Yeah, some of it's up there, and there's another slide coming up. I'll just whiz through them because we don't want to kind of spend ages. We looked at, we did a lot to fight against modern day slavery in Stop the Traffic. We concentrated on fair trade, especially fair trade chocolate. We did a lot of research into ethical consumerism, and we supported Amnesty International, and then an organisation called Stop Female Genital Mutilation Now. One of our members came from the Democratic Republic of Congo, so we did some work supporting people there. We looked at the Ombudsman Service, we looked at ethical arts and crafts, and we went into a campaign called Baby Milk Action, which basically means just don't buy anything that's made by Nestle because they're dreadful. And we looked at fair trade, we had an ethical fair. We looked at environmental issues, and we looked at homelessness, working with the Whitechapel Centre. We worked with asylum seekers, and we did a lot of work in conjunction with St Anne's and St Bernard's Roman Catholic Church, which they're just kind of mega good at social justice stuff. And there were a few other projects that we got involved in that weren't actually in the Peace and Justice group. Yeah, that's it. We prepared, working with that church, that Roman Catholic Church and another one, we prepared for a Syrian refugee family to come to Liverpool, and we supported them for 2 years and kept in touch with them. Jenny, one of our previous curates, led us in a campaign called Love Your Neighbour, which consisted of providing families in need with food parcels every week during the pandemic. And we also got involved, led by Charles Woolnough and others, in Eco Church, so that we've made it so that our church is much more ecologically sound than it used to be. And and we've actually got an award up on the wall there if you'd like to look at it. We could do better, but we've done pretty well there, I think. Good for Charles. And but a few years ago, we kind of changed tack and started getting involved in Citizens UK. Over to you.
Brilliant, Beach. Thank you. Well, I mean, a number of those charities we still give money to as a church, and folks are kind of volunteering at. And it certainly feels to me like there's something in our kind of history, clearly something in our more recent history, but obviously this church was, doesn't have a great, the original kind of money for the building of this church came in part from slave traders, we know that, and so there's some deeper history that's sort of a bit broken and a bit kind of, just a bit tragic in some ways. But but it seems to me that as we've kind of reopened the church and rebirthed things here, that actually God's calling us to be people of justice, to almost sort of turn, for the next generation to make it, to really fight and contend that actually some of those historic injustices would never happen again, and to play our part in that in our city today. So well done for leading us with that. I mean, Citizens UK, our kind of national organisation who, in some ways, their particular focus is on tackling the kind of structural injustice, the things that cause poverty or the things that kind of spoil our lives. So one of their big things was the national living wage, and so they're responding to people experiencing food poverty. And clearly food hubs and food banks are really great at meeting that need, but actually they were really trying to say, well, what's the underlying thing here? What's the underlying injustice that's keeping people in poverty? And part of the narrative that they were pursuing was basically that people are not paid enough money, that people at the sort of the base level of income are not getting a wage that they can afford to live on properly. And so they won the living wage campaign, and it's why now the minimum wage is whatever it is, significantly more than where we were 10 years ago. So lots to celebrate in that. But they're really asking that question, what's the structural stuff that's broken? And how do we mobilize people across different organizations to sort of build power and say, well, who can we challenge in the government? Who are the power holders where we can achieve the deeper change that we believe is right? So that's how they work. How are we engaging, Beach, with that in Liverpool?
Right, okay, well, we are definitely Liverpool citizens now. It's taken about 4 years or maybe more to get us to this stage, but we had our founding assembly in November, and that was an amazing evening. We just filled the concert room in St George's Hall, and it was the culmination of a listening campaign that had gone on during the previous few months. And I think most of you will remember that we asked you questions as part of the listening campaign, because the way Citizens UK works is that we listen to people, ask them what their opinion is, and then we look at what they've said and we decide what issues to look at and to act on, and then we take action, and then we repeat that cycle. We listen again, work out what needs to be done next, take action, listen again. And so last year we had a listening campaign. We listened to lots of you and people outside the church as well. And the question we asked was, what 2 things do you think would make Liverpool an even better place to live? Yep. And so we wrote down all the things, we recorded all the things that people said, and we decided on 5 main issues that we were going to look at. And each of these issues became the action groups in Liverpool Citizens. And the actual 5 things are housing and homelessness, community issues, transport, cost of living, health, which involves access to the NHS, GP appointments, and dental services. So we've got to the point now where we've listened, we're starting doing some action, where each of these action groups has got people working in it and doing research and working out what we've got to do, because we really need to find things that are doable and winnable, because we can't just be spending time doing what the government should be doing, or just wasting time. We've got to do stuff we can actually achieve something in. So the first action group is housing and homelessness. And we've got Charlotte Woodall with us at the moment. Stand up, Charlotte. Thank you, Charlotte, for all the work you've been doing. And we've also got Sinead Fletcher and Grace Twum. Are any of them here? I don't think so. And Lola joined in that action group. I think Lola really wants to be in the health group, but she couldn't get to that, so she joined in this one, so that was really good. And the actual kind of subtext of housing and homelessness that action group is going to concentrate on is temporary accommodation. That many people who've been made homeless, have been evicted, or people who are asylum seekers live in temporary accommodation, which is very substandard, and they're in it for much too long. So at the moment, these wonderful people in this action group are doing lots of research to find out what was the best thing we can concentrate on. So if anybody wants to help them, that would be great. The next action group is community issues. Now we've got 17 organisations actually involved in Liverpool Citizens, and some of those organisations are much further on than we are in actually taking action. And one of those is the Roman Catholic Church I've mentioned already, St Anne's and St Bernard's, and they've realised that Tunnel Road is a really dangerous place. Accidents have happened there when people have been trying to cross the road to get to the railway station or to get to the retail park. And so they've been campaigning for a safer pedestrian crossing there. And the City Council is listening to them and is trying to work with them to get that pedestrian crossing constructed to help people cross Tunnel Road safely. And I think maybe at this point I should have said this a bit earlier, that as part of the founding assembly, we actually took all these 5 issues and we had the Mayor of Liverpool, the leader of the council, the leader of the NHS in Cheshire and Merseyside. We had the CEO of Arriva Buses and somebody else, and I can't remember who that was. And we questioned them and we challenged them to work with us to achieve these things and make life in Liverpool better for ordinary people in Liverpool. And they have signed up. They didn't have much option really, because we said, we want you to sign up. Will you sign up? And so they signed this big pledge. And so they've done that. So this leads me to transport, the third action group. We had that initial challenge to the Arriva Bus Company, and we're encouraging them to provide a more reliable service because kids aren't getting to school on time, people aren't getting to work on time because buses are cancelled just suddenly without any warning. So we're continuing, the Transport Action Group is continuing monitoring and reporting back to check that Arriva is living up to the promises it made at the founding assembly. Now, the fourth action group is cost of living. Now, lots of people in Liverpool are really struggling, and we were trying to think of what could we do to help them. Having a real living wage, having employers who give people a real living wage would be a great help, but what we're trying to do is get behind Monksdown Primary School, because they've been working really hard to get the local council to provide free school meals for more families on lower incomes. Because at the moment, to qualify for kids to have free school meals, the family has to be on universal credit, and the total income has to be less than £7,500 a year, and that's nothing really, not very much at all. So either we need to have an increase of that threshold to include more children, because if these children come to school and then they haven't had a proper breakfast, they can't concentrate. And I think those of you who are parents will have noticed that your kids get they're not themselves when they're hungry, and they get hangry too, and they can't possibly be concentrating on education if they're not fed properly. So free school meals is a big campaign that Monksdown Primary School is involved in, and they were actually on Good Morning Britain the other morning, and if you'd like, and I'm going to put it on the Citizens UK STJ WhatsApp, and you can look at it if you want to. So that's the cost of living. Now the last one's a bit disappointing because it's the health one. We haven't actually, this action group hasn't got a leader yet, so we could do with someone who could help, somebody who might be interested in health to step forward and lead the health action group because they haven't actually decided which action they want to take. So sorry for rabbiting on about, but that's it.
Beach, isn't that great? I mean, there's so much information there. So I don't know, you might be feeling a bit like me, a bit almost overwhelmed by the amount of activity that's going on there. But I mean, I'm so encouraged that you've got all these people from organizations across our city who are pursuing this kind of, this justice, fairness, the common good, a better life for all. It's just, yeah.
And I must stress, these organisations aren't necessarily churches. It's what's called Citizens UK is a broad-based organisation. You don't have to be a church. You just have to be an organisation that wants to get involved in improving things for ordinary people. We've got schools, parts of the NHS. We've got housing associations as well as churches involved.
Brilliant, Beach. And one of the things I've found in community organising is that actually putting you alongside non-Christians in these organisations is a great opportunity to talk about our faith and about why we as Christians feel that this is important, and that's often fruitful in terms of building those friendships and connections into church. So, Beach, I think you're saying that, when we think about the ministry of Jesus today, as well as kind of alpha courses and people coming to faith, as well as the structures of our church family where we can grow in our discipleship, as well as those sort of more normal aspects of church life, you're saying that, seeking, freedom for the prisoners, justice, recovery of sight for the blind, the good news for the poor, actually there's a sort of deep, hard work here, which is about seeking those things in the structural ways we do society and we live together. That's right, I think, isn't it? That's what you're saying. This is important to God, how people live today.
And I think at the moment, to get political, that thing has been put at risk, especially after all these years of a Conservative government in place. There's been underfunding of the NHS, and lots of people have become very poorer than they should be, and there's hardly any money left, so it's very difficult for a Labour government to come in and change things. So sorry if I'm offending people by getting...
Beej is going to get on a soapbox here, but there's challenges. We've got some big challenges. So Beej, if folks are sitting here today thinking, gosh, I would like to get involved in this. I mean, we would love it. I mean, if half of our church were involved in Citizen, it would just be incredible, wouldn't it? How much could we do? We've got lots of people involved. There's lots of people signed up for the WhatsApp. We've got a WhatsApp with 20, 30, 40 people, whatever it is. If people want to get on that WhatsApp, if they want to get connected with you, if they might be able to give some time to one of these action groups, how do they do that, Beej?
Right, okay. Right, I'm going to loiter around over there after the service. So if you want to come and, if you feel that God's saying, hey, I want you to get involved in this, then come and talk to me. And I can find out what would be the best thing for you to do, whether you can get involved in an action group or whether you can get involved in the core group, what exactly would suit you. So come and chat to me, or you can chat to Jude or Jerome when he's better, because he's kind of leading this up. And so come and talk to me. Fantastic. So Beej, you're going to be kind of front left at the end of the service, floating around. Love to chat. Folks, should we thank Beej for just coming up and talking us through that? Bless you, Beej.
Hey, really inspiring and just good to know, isn't it, that there's people really kind of giving time and giving of themselves to these things. We're going to be sharing communion in a minute, which is kind of partly a way of kind of saying, Lord, come and help us as a church community to be your hands and feet and your agents in the world. But we've got some questions just off the back of that conversation with Beach, which hopefully will be up on the screen in a moment. Maybe some questions on the PowerPoint. So 3 questions just to get us thinking together. So what concerns us most in our city when we're kind of walking around and seeing life in our different communities or ways we live, where we live in the city? What concerns us the most? What do we feel most inspired about today, having listened to Beach? And thirdly, how might we get involved? And I know some of you, many of you, are involved in different ways already. But is that okay? We're just going to give ourselves 4 or 5 minutes just to sort of jump into those questions and kind of just kick those around. So maybe we might want to move around. Can I suggest 2s, 3s, 4s, probably no more than 4 because you're not going to get a chance to all share. But should we just kick those questions around for 5 minutes together? Is that okay? Let's do that. Let's just move around. If you're not in a 2 or 3 or 4, just move around and jump in with someone else. And let's kick those questions around together. Go for it. Fantastic.